All right. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with Evan Gillespie, the winner of the World Builder contest and receiver of the Elegant Literature $3,000 award for new writers. Evan, thanks for coming. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great. Thanks for having me. This is quite an opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm here with also Nathan Ba, the judge of the contest. And Nathan runs a newsletter by the same name, worldbuilders.ai. It's got 50,000 subscribers. And Nathan talks about storytelling from both a fiction and a business standpoint. It's really interesting. You should go check it out. Nathan, thank you for joining us as well.
Yeah, I love being the judge. There's some great stories, and Evan, yours really stood out to me. So awesome. Great writing.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Evan, your story called "The 7 Words to Kill," or "The 7 Words That Killed a God," right?
Yeah, that's right. It had a few other titles before. I was kind of a little more nihilistic in my first approach, and it was called "An Angry God." And then at one point, it was called "7 Words to Kill a God." And then I was like, well, shouldn't it be 7 words? So then I altered it one more time, and I was hoping someone would catch that, maybe like, oh, it's 7 words. So.
Yeah, I saw that. I actually had that written down. I want to talk about that because I thought that was pretty cool. So if anybody watching this, if you haven't read the story, go read it right now. It's great. There's also 9 other fantastic stories in the issue World Builders. It's free to download and read from our website. So go read that and then come on back. But Evan, for anyone who ignores those instructions, do you want to give us like a 30-second recap, a minute recap of what your story is about?
Yeah, so basically, it was a lot of the times it's driven by the prompt and, the world builders. I just imagined this, big chamber, kind of like, this Mount Olympus, but I wanted to have it my own kind of spin on that with the gods in there. And they basically just sit around and they, make or destroy universes as they see fit. And, these two gods, Nerothema and Sylvius, they have this contest to basically see who can win over the followers of, the world they create. And it kind of goes from there.
Yeah, very, very cool story. So what we're doing here in this interview is we just want to get to know you, Evan, talk about, the inspiration behind the story, what we thought was so cool about it, and maybe what your plans are as a writer, especially going forward now that you've won a significant award like this. So I'm going to hand it over to Nathan because I know Nathan's got some questions. We want to talk about your story. Let's go ahead, Nathan. Thank you.
Oh, first, Evan, thoroughly enjoyed your story, your writing. You did a great job. I was very impressed with what you were able to kind of portray in 3, 4, 5 pages, however long it was.
Yeah, thank you. That's always the challenge, sometimes you just want to keep going. You got more, and you got to keep it slim. And it's actually one of the things I've enjoyed about the contest, where you just have to be so careful with the words that you pick, because it's so limited.
Just Craig. It's below 2,000 words, I believe.
Yeah, 2,000 words is the maximum. Evan, do you remember offhand what yours was? Was it pretty? It was pretty close to the 2,000 mark, wasn't it?
Yeah, I normally push it pretty close right to that 2,000 mark. It's I'll write stories because I've done the other months and it will be over, and then I gotta take that red pen and start slashing. So yeah. Try to push it to the limit.
So your I guess impact or power per word was just off the charts to me in this story. So
well, thank you.
I'm curious what that, after you draft, what is that red pen looking for? What stands out to get crossed out? What stands out to keep?
Yeah, it's a lot of times it's kind of I'll try to look at it from the technical aspect, line by line. Okay, I said this in 15 words. Can I portray the same thing in 5 words? This the thesaurus is my best friend on some of these. It's just how can I say this in less words? And sometimes you look at the dialogue and does that make sense, or the concepts, or sometimes you're hey, can my story exist without this? And then you ultimately made that decision to slash it. Sometimes I'll have a folder or a Word document, and if I like something but I know I can't use it, I might save it for a later time.
That's a lot of people have sort of the cut file where if you got something that you really like, but it always hurts cutting things out of your story. So you cut it out and you put it in a file that you could use later. And I mean, do you ever find yourself actually using any of those bits later, or is it just help with removing them and they end up getting parked?
I've kind of found that it's more helpful if I end up using them later in the same story than trying to be like, okay, like a story I write 6 months from now, like I'm gonna remember, oh, that one line that was so good, like let me go fish that out. So sometimes it's like trying to find a place for it later in the story.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's actually really good too. If you were, for example, if you're writing a longer piece like a novel and you're cutting out dialogue and things like that, like keeping a cut file and even keeping multiple files, like one for each character. For example, if you cut dialogue from them, it could help you keep a sense of their voice and keep consistency with that. And also just pull snippets of conversation for later if you needed them.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
don't know about you with your writing, but I'll have like, 7 different versions. Like I'll send them back and forth to myself from different computers, and it'll be up to like, I always keep all the old ones because I'm like, well, maybe I'll go like, something from version 1 that I wanted to fish out. But
Yeah, like final draft, like draft 1, draft 2, draft 2.1, final.
Exactly. I got to give a shout out to my girls. So Riley, Isabel, Sadie, and Ella. Dad loves you. So if you watch this, and then my beautiful wife Chelsea, she holds this whole circus together. So
that's awesome. Thank you, and thank you for shouting out to them. Are they there with you today, and like just hiding in another room, listening at the door?
Or I'm bribing them to stay away for a little bit.
I'm going to be watching that door in the background to see if it cracks open, little heads peek through. How old are your kids?
So my oldest, so she's at a competition dance with my wife in Atlanta right now. So she's 11. Then we got a 9-year-old Isabel, and then we got twins Sadie and Ella. So they just turned 7. So
full house.
Oh yeah, lots of girl power around here.
So Evan, did I read somewhere that you are a military man?
I am. I'm active duty Air Force right now. So
active duty Air Force. What's your kind of primary role? What do you do? What's kind of day-to-day life for you?
So the job itself is called RAWS. It's Radar, Airfield, and Weather Systems. So a lot of the navigational aids are, at the airport, you'll see like the orange and white checkered boxes.
Yep.
That's like kind of our stuff, just ground to air radios, radar, things like that. But right now I'm sitting in a functional manager job. So I'm out here in Florida, loving it, and just kind of being a functional manager for that career field. So I've been in about 14 years now. So it's been a pretty good journey.
How do you manage? So do you have to go, Evan, live away from home, or do you work close? Is your active duty close enough to home that you get to commute back and forth or something like that?
Oh yeah, I'm super fortunate. So I live off base. Traditionally, we lived on base, but this is the first time we wanted to buy our first home. So it's about a 25-minute commute, but it's been really good because I've gotten into the world of audiobooks and just thinking about thoughts and ideas, and it's kind of nice to have that decompression to and from work. Where before it's like 5 minutes away, and it's like you got to jump right back and forth. So it's nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service, man. That's
support. Thank you.
Yeah. You guys are both American, I imagine. I'm Canadian, so thank you for serving in the American Air Force. Yeah. Air Force, was it right?
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. How do you, and I'll pass it back to Nathan after this now that your connection looks secure, but how do you juggle your writing with, you have 4 kids, all 11 and under, pair of twins, and you're active duty Air Force. How do you fit in? How do you fit in writing, man?
It's tough. It's a challenge. It's a lot of late nights. It's a lot of writing stories like 5 minutes at a time, lunch breaks, weekends. And it's just one of those things where, about 2 years ago, I made the decision I was going to get really serious about the writing. And you kind of find a way, Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. You got to scrape it out wherever you can. So
that's something I've.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, once I'm like hopefully able to retire, and just like put all my effort into the writing, like I'm excited to like what I can accomplish and what I can do, when it's just like wake up in the morning and write till you go to sleep, that kind of mentality. So
that's something I've been learning a lot about recently. I like to look into the processes or routines of either great writers or great musicians or whoever. And it's pretty crazy to me how different it works for everybody. Like Neil Gaiman writes every single day, specific times, all that good stuff. Stephen King also does that, but they're different in the way that Stephen King doesn't do outlines, Neil Gaiman does. And then you have Brandon Sanderson, who does his best writing at 1 a.m., doesn't wake up until noon. Like, that's a completely different routine. So I'm always curious about like what kind of routines, or how do people get their writing in? Is it those short bursts? Is it longer hours? So it sounds like for you, it's
I'm
those
like
short
hard,
bursts.
you know what I mean? I steal time where I can, and that's like, that's how they all get written for the most part.
And,
Lots of caffeine, staying up late.
but you want to get on that sort of more set schedule eventually, or you just want to have the luxury of more time to just kind of focus on it?
I mean, hey, I'd love to be out on the beach with a laptop, just, typing away at, however I feel. But I don't know, there is something kind of like special where you feel like you've earned a story, like where you kind of like, you scrape out those minutes and you finally get it together and you put the final period on there. And it feels good. But yeah, I would like to have just kind of like a free form whenever stuff I feel inspired. I just want to sit down and write. Having that freedom would be nice.
Yeah.
That's a gem right there. Whenever you've earned a story, that's a great line.
I love that. I know what you mean too, because the first novella I ever successfully actually finished, the drafting, I was writing on my phone on the bus in my 25-minute commute to my bartending job. And I would I'd bartend from 5 p.m. till 3 a.m., go to sleep by 5 or 6, wake up at noon or something, 2 o'clock, and I'd have enough time to shower, get ready, and get on the bus to go back to work. Life was awful. It felt like I didn't have any time to write, but actually just deciding I was going to do it on my phone in that 25-minute commute. And it took me like 6 weeks to get this novella, but I felt like so much more proud of it than some other things that I've written since, because it was that fight that really did. So good job. I mean, you wrote the 7 words that killed a god in that style, just like when your kids were in bed on your commute, things like that?
Yeah, because like, I don't know why I do it to myself sometimes, but I'll be like, oh, it's quiet, like, let me sit down, and then it's just like, dad, you hear the crying, the screaming or whatever, and it's just like, the up and down and up and down. But I think it's kind of like conditioned me where I can write with like a lot of distractions. Like my wife needs like everything nice and calm and quiet, to concentrate, and I'm just like, I got music, screaming, TV, and maybe it's like a generational thing. Like I could just bring the noise.
You got to build up the resilience. Nathan, you study these authors in their different routines. You said you were interested in it. What kind of routine do you do? Do you have one?
Good question. I do client work in the morning, and then I write my own stuff in the afternoon, essentially. Yeah, that's literally exactly it. And then on Fridays, I'll write my newsletter and go from there. The biggest thing for me is the idea generation, which is, Evan, something I actually wanted to talk to you about, because your story, it stood out for a couple of different things. When we didn't go through them one by one, but the first was just the idea and how you framed it, because the topic was world builders, and a lot of people took that and they built really interesting worlds, just one world. You took that, and I think, and I'm curious if this was intentional, where your thought process was, where you had these gods, and they're living in their own world, but they also are actually world builders themselves, and that they create these planets and set things in motion and have, billions of people essentially under their rule. So you had like built multiple worlds and then framed it in such a way that you had worlds within worlds. And you did that all within 2,000 words, which was pretty awesome. So I'm curious about the idea, what you thought about the framing process.
I did take it a little literal, kind of a little meta with it. So you guys have seen, the first Men in Black, where at the end it's got the little alien boy and he's playing with the marbles. I kind of had that vision in my mind of just all these galaxies contained within, this giant sphere. And yeah, just like the worlds within worlds, and how, a lot of times we have this pursuit of like existence and how we got here, and life and death. And like, I like examining all those topics. So, like I was saying earlier with, the story started out with Sylvius, and it was kind of like this cold indifference, this cynicism and ego driven, way of making these worlds, how it's all about him. And then I kind of realized I needed a counterbalance in there. And that's where, Narrathema came in. And, showing how builders can be, kind and loving, or they can be, cruel and destructive. So I try to do a little bit of engineering with it.
Yeah, that really stood out. And then your first line was one of the other things that stood out to me. It was, I have it up so I can read it directly. Sylvius plucked the world from the cosmos and crushed it in his hand. It's a pretty good first line.
Oh, thank you.
How long did that kind of take you to come up with? Was it, you had the rest of the story and you were looking for a great first line? What was that process?
Another thing with like the contests themselves is, I've done ones where the whole premise was like, can you have a good first line? And so with all these contests, like I feel like I've taken something out of all of them. But with this one and my writing style, they talk about, the muse was talking to me or whatever. For me, I'm a very visual person. So when I do these stories, a lot of times I have these scenes and I'll see it almost like as if I'm watching a show or a movie. And it's me trying to describe what I'm seeing in my mind the best I can. And so a lot of times I'll have like the first opening scene will start. And then, maybe even like the last scene, I kind of cap my stories in my mind. And then it's like, being inspired what happens in the middle. Sometimes I'll write stories out of order and I'll end up with like this puzzle of scenes that I have to kind of like, piece them together and get it where it needs to go. So yeah, but it's a lot of it's spontaneous. It just kind of bubbles up like this spring in my mind, and I just pluck out these scenes and try to describe them.
Nice. That scene thing that's Brandon Sanderson talks about, he does that actually. And then he'll put them in order and add connectors and through lines and whatnot, but he thinks them in different scenes. So pretty good person to have something in common with.
Thank you. I've tried to do, more detailed, like, follow a specific structure. And I'm just like, the dog seeing a squirrel. It's just like, I just kind of veer off and, I try to follow where my thought process is taking me, and hopefully I can, mine some goodness out of that.
Yeah. And then that probably brings back the editing process to what can we cut out and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And the editing gets a lot of fun, when you have like 8 scenes that are related, but they're not in the right order. And then you're just like, oh man, like what have I done for myself? So sometimes I curse myself for not having like a better structure.
Do you enjoy the editing process, or is it is it a chore for you?
I like it. I kind of look at writing as almost like a puzzle or a game, like especially with the contest where it's like, okay, I have 2,000 words, and if you can put the right words in the right order, and sequence them together, you can create something out of that. And I think the editing part is, very important to that process, because, you can throw a bunch of words on paper, but if you don't edit it correctly, you don't have your end product. So
you mentioned starting with the bookends. One of the other things that stood out to me about your book was the ending itself. I think a lot of good endings are very much like a reflection of the beginning almost. And you did that in such a way where it was Atheon kills Sylvius, goes, sits at his desk and starts working. And he has a little interaction with, I'm going to absolutely butcher the other god's names, Narathema.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
they have that.
I did a good job with the names, and then
I was going with Narathema.
Yeah, whatever. I support whatever pronunciation you like.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's your story. You can correct us as the author. And Narathema is the name.
Well, it's kind of like potato, English and UK. Sometimes. Yeah. I've heard of taco pronounced taco, and I'm just like, oh.
I really like in sort of like in novels that have kind of a bigger scope. A lot of times, different cultures or different people from different areas will have different ways. Like they'll have entirely different names for the same person, but they'll also have different ways of pronouncing the name. Like, and it might be that your main character will come in contact with somebody from this other culture and specifically note, like, oh, they say Narathema instead of Narathema, and spell it out. And that kind of like one tells the reader what they should be thinking. I've always liked that kind of subtle play. But also highlights that different cultures, that it's a real world. I've always enjoyed that aspect. Anyway, sorry, back to you, Nathan.
That's a great point. So Evan, I'm curious how you think about endings, and I'd love to hear just a little bit more specifics on what you were shooting for, what you were trying to accomplish with the ending in 7 Words That Killed a God.
This one in particular, I wanted to have like a sense of finality, but also that, the story goes on. Like all our stories, like potentially they go on because life always goes on. And I like this, almost passing of the torch to Atheon. And it also kind of raised a question, which, I didn't get into in the story, is like, how many of these other gods, like, how did they get there? Does every god in this world, do they ascend through their own means to get there? And those were questions I kind of was left asking myself afterwards. Even as the writer, sometimes the stories can kind of expand in your mind and take on their own meanings. But for this one in particular, because sometimes I'll write stories and it's almost like I'm writing like a chapter of a bigger book. And so I try to get away with that, or get away from that, with these stories where it's like give some more closure, but let the, reader know that there could be more. And then, it's up to you to take your imagination and run with that.
That's great. I really liked what you said about the passing of the torch, because it felt like a great scene to end on, even though it implied that this does continue.
I hope you were left with a feeling like, of completion, but, your imagination is what took it further after that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then-
The story felt finished. Like it felt like a complete story, 100%. But you also did an excellent job of indicating that it could easily be more, and there was definitely more there's more lead up to it. Narathema. Did I say that right this time?
Yeah, you did.
He said in the story that he was the first one that awoke, and then the other 9 made their way to him eventually through chance or fate. And so he's kind of like the God King. And so you could easily, and this whole thing read to me as almost like it could be a parable or a story that is like the foundation of a culture kind of thing. Like they have this story and this is almost like being told. But you could explore the other 9 and how they came to him. You could explore what Atheon does after. And so there's all this potential on either side, but the story itself is a complete story. And I think that was one of the things that was exceptional about it.
Well, and one of the things that I wanted to be a takeaway, which, I hope it was for some people, being influenced as being a father. And basically it kind of boils down to, believing in yourself and knowing that, if you think it's possible, eventually, no matter how long it takes, you can get there. Something like to teach our children, like trying to help them believe in themselves. And that was, Narathema was kind of like that father figure. And look at like our civilization, it's like, hey, I'm going to get to that, I'm going to get to the moon one day. I'm going to get to Mars one day. As soon as you put that ball in motion, eventually, over time, like we'll find a way to get there. And I like that concept, for humanity as general, like we'll find a way eventually. Like maybe one day we can shift dimensions, one day we'll have faster than light travel. Like who knows what'll be possible. But we got to imagine it first.
That brings me to that actual 7 words. You will become a god of creation. Is what you're talking about there? Is that where those came from?
Yeah, because, I racked my brain. It's like, I kind of had the concept of the title first before I knew what the 7 words were going to be.
No pressure.
Yeah, they had to be good. They can't just, fall flat. Like, you'll do real good, dude. It's like, so I wanted it to have impact, but it was just kind of boiled down to, it was more important getting them to believe that they could be anything as opposed to what those specific words were. Like the intention was, you can do it, and believe in yourself to do that.
Yeah, and then when Atheon came through the doors, Sylvius knew what was happening. That was a cool moment.
He knew he messed up.
Yeah,
yeah. I found it pretty interesting too. So when Atheon came through the door, his first question was, "Which of you is Narathema?" And I was kind of like, oh wow, how does he know? And then the words that he spoke was, "You will become a god of creation." Didn't necessarily mention himself, like how Sylvius had said, "Kill everybody who worships Narathema, worship Sylvius." So everybody knew who both gods were. But Atheon, presumably, their culture wouldn't have known from the get-go, because Narathema didn't say that in the words. But it made me think like, well, obviously they've had a prophecy. They figured out how to get through the creation barriers. And find this place. So there must be more story in there than when Atheon and his culture were figuring out the problems and figured out how to do this. They must have found out information. And I just thought that added more depth to it. Like there was more stuff going on that we didn't necessarily know about how it happened, but we saw that it did happen because it wasn't just he just showed up and was like, I'm a god of creation now. Like, thank you for the kind words. He had obviously pursued knowledge and found it off screen. And I thought that added depth to the story in a very small, like couple of words, actually.
Well, thank you. And another thing that I was doing or trying to do with the story is just examining that concept of time, how for us, we think of like, 100 years being so long, that's a lifetime. But for them to be able to just ponder a question, for like a million years or whatever, just like really try to look at time as being like meaningless to, an individual. So that was fun being able to like play with that concept.
Yeah. Well, again, congrats on a fantastic short story. How many of the contests have you done?
So the Fearless Friendship, I think, was the first one. That was the first time I got published, which was with you guys. So,
what was your story in that one again? I remember I enjoyed it. Well, obviously, it got published, but
Sempiternal was the first one.
Sempiternal, that was a cool one. Nathan, I think you'd like that one too. It was kind of
I'll look that up.
Yeah. I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah.
Which that was actually the first time I had written anything like from a historical perspective. And it just kind of goes back to, anybody out there listening, how building and awesome these contests can be and how they can kind of help you sharpen your craft. Because that was the first time I'd gone back and started looking up, world events and the way people talked and the way people dressed and their equipment and all that kind of stuff. So that was fun. But yeah, I've been plugging away at these contests. There was an honorable mention with you guys. Let's see. So Hell Can Have the Rest for the Killers issue. That was a fun one. Prescription was the first one for I think the Open Road issue.
An honorable mention, or just the first one that you wrote and submitted?
That was the first one I wrote, and that was an honorable mention. So that kind of like, it got me excited for the whole thing. It was just like, honorable mention, let's go. So each step along the way has been just kind of more encouraging and kind of gives you that boost to keep going.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, a couple honorable mentions, a publication, and what is that, like 5-6 months later, an award. So fantastic, and congratulations.
Very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask a little bit about your broader, I think, goals as a writer. What initially got you writing, who your inspirations are, that kind of thing. So maybe we start with like this short story. We've talked a lot about how it has potential on either end to be developed further. Have you thought about, what that might look like, creating a bit of a longer novel or series within that world?
I haven't particularly thought about this story. For this one, at least, it felt complete to me. Not that I wouldn't ever enjoy jumping back into that. But some stories, some other ones, like I've felt like kind of drawn more to those. So actually, sometime this year, I'm trying to release a short story anthology. So about 16 stories. And I think I'm going to self-publish that through Amazon. And that's almost kind of like a sampler of like who I am. And, it's different genres, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, like a bunch of everything. And maybe kind of based on that reception, taking one of those and taking it further. I also have like a science fiction novel that I have completed. It's 155,000 words. And so trying to kind of figure out the best way to present that, what I want to do with that. And I'm also writing another science fiction, full novel. So it's like, I got my hands full, but, in future, if I were able to do, more anthologies, kind of taking like the best of those stories or the best received and, doing a next step in that journey for each story.
Well, reach out when you release it. I'd love to read it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You said, I believe earlier you said that you really flipped the switch and got serious about writing 2 years ago. Is that accurate?
Yeah, about 2 years ago. I kind of made that commitment to myself.
What flipped? What was it? A specific moment? Was it a realization over time?
I think it was just kind of like a culmination of, I'll say like about 2 years ago, like I was just kind of going through a tough time, and focusing on the writing was just like really bringing me so much, relief from that, and starting to, bring me joy. And, some of the people I was working with when I first got to this area, a great guy, Gary Westfall. So he's a writer as well. And he was really encouraging me to get back in. And having a beta reader is, awesome. If anybody doesn't have one, having someone to look at this and just give you that sanity check and be like, this is awesome. Or, hey man, that kind of sucks. You might want to redo that. So I think we all need that sometimes. And so it started with that longer science fiction novel. I'd kind of rehash like a chapter at a time, and starting to look at each chapter in a longer novel as like a short story in itself, trying to get, leaner and meaner with every single chapter. I'm just trying to kind of make it better overall. So that's where it really kicked off for me.
Are there specific authors or broadly storytellers that give you a lot of inspiration? Who are you inspired by?
So I love Joe Abercrombie. So the first Law series is great. I like listen to all the books on audiobook all the way through. Stephen Pacey was like, I never thought I would know the name of an audiobook speaker, but he's just like, he's killing it. Sanderson, I love his series. Mistborn was a great fantasy jump off for me getting into his world. And the way he does magic systems like inspired me to want to, try to make my own magic system one day. Like that could even try to compare to that. And Stephen King is also one that I really like. So all those guys, like I like people that can also, like Stephen King, where he can do fantasy, he can do horror, and just kind of like, I don't really feel pinned down yet to one genre. Like I really like science fiction and fantasy the best. And I've been listening to some old, 1920s, 1940s, Asimov, Heinlein, Clark, all these people, just seeing, because it's like, I don't know. I feel like, I don't want to be that old guy like kids these days. Like they don't know how amazing and inspirational those people were to the generations that we like now. So it's been nice to kind of go back and see like how the basics, like see how it's done, and then kind of give it my modern spin, for the new day.
Yeah. That's great. Isaac Asimov is one of my favorites as well. He's an absolute legend, incredible writer. And then, so you said that you like to hit the different genres. I imagine that's something this contest is actually great about, because looking back through the past issues, it's not just science fiction, fantasy. There's some horror, there's some all that good stuff. So have you really enjoyed that aspect of Elegant Lit?
Yeah, I loved it. We were talking on Twitter, Craig. I was like, where do you come up with all these genres, or like, your idea prompts? You're like, I just pull them out of a hat, no big deal.
Yeah, I basically, I have a list of like, I've tried to go with alliteration a lot of the time. You can tell that not always, but I've tried to go with alliteration and then sort of like some sort of concept and some sort of either emotion or something like tricky time, or like fearless friendship is emotion concept, future fears. I did 2 fears apparently. Merry magic, dire days. These are kind of like the things I'm going for. And then I just take that theme and just try and think of how I can just throw ideas at all the writers that want to participate in the contest. Like if you read through my prompts, it's basically just like this. What about that? You could write this. And it's just trying to throw as many different ideas for as many different genres, as many different ways as possible, just to get people's minds going, and the breadth of work that comes back from these things. Like even though we take all genres, each prompt often lends itself, leans towards something. Like World Builders kind of lent itself to science fiction, and I got a ton of science fiction from it. But people write everything. You get contemporary, you get romance from all of these things. Like even with Haunted Hideaways, which was clearly a horror themed contest for Halloween, I had tons of contemporary and romance and things that aren't horror, because people just took that and ran with it. But I have a lot of fun doing it, and I just make them up really. So yeah, we get a lot of compliments on it, and I appreciate that. But I'm just happy that they help you guys kind of get going and get practicing and constantly write these stories.
Yeah, and I like how it hasn't always been, it definitely hasn't been the same. So each month it's like, I'm always excited to see like, what's that new prompt, what's that new theme. And just a little bit more, Nathan, like for you, for my process is, these themes will come out, and what I'll normally do is I'll take like a Word document and I'll write the theme, the item, and the word count, and that'll be at the top, and I'll just kind of like stare at it and wait for the ideas to just start kind of springing out, like throwing them on paper.
Well, so how do you generate a bunch of different ideas and then you're like something catches your eye and you go deeper?
For me, it is kind of like I'll have like that one big idea or the one concept that'll hit me, and I'm like, okay, like I like that. Very rarely will I change like completely mid writing. There has been a
Mhm.
story before where it's like, you're a page in and it's like it just doesn't feel like it's working. I don't know if you've ever been like that where you're like you're writing and it's like you
Oh,
just
for sure.
like this is not like
Yeah.
not working, and just scrap the whole thing and start it again. But for the most part, I kind of have that initial like, okay, this is going to be the heart of the story. Like this is what I want. And then within that, sometimes the themes will change a little bit. Like say for this one, where it was kind of more of like a pessimistic story about how we're all small and insignificant, and these gods just kind of do whatever they want. It didn't feel right, but the concept felt right. And then Naratheme was born, and then it just I kind of write like what I enjoy or what I would enjoy seeing. And so, I was happy with the visual concepts that I was able to kind of think about with that.
That's a great process. That's really interesting that like from an idea generation perspective, it's like how you do that.
And, I don't know if it lends itself to it, but for me, when I originally started writing, and this was like 15 years ago, I wanted to be a film, like write scripts or whatever
Mm.
for movies.
Is that why kind of why you see you sound like you're very visual? Is that a part of it?
Yeah, I think that's where it happened, where I was like, I'm going to write movie scripts. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And the science fiction story that I have now, it's called The Endless Night. It actually started out as a movie script. And, we talk about clawing out time. I used to work in restaurants, and I would have like a notebook in like the bread bin. And between orders, I would sit there, scratch out ideas for this thing. And then, the script was done at one point, and you think like, oh, I'll Google some agent and send them my info, and that's it. Like millionaire, let's do it. And apparently that's not how it works. Apparently, and so I wanted to keep going, and then I started converting the movie script into a book, and then life kind of happened and kept kind of coming back to it a little bit, and then eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to really dedicate myself to this project. But yeah, I think just the visual piece of it. So if I ever do transition back into it, hopefully I'll be a better writer for it going back.
Have you like always wanted to write, or always been doing that? Was it since you were a kid and somebody gave you a novel and you're like, ah, dang, and started the hobby there? Or was it more, how did you get into writing? Not like taking it seriously like 2 years ago, but before that, was that writing something you did sort of as a hobby, didn't take it seriously, or did it just start 2 years ago?
No, like a lot of like, I want to say it kind of, I don't know if I'd say it was born out of boredom, like, so back in the day, when I was working in these restaurants, one of my first jobs, I was at Subway, and I remember just like, I would be washing dishes or listening to music. And for me, the visuals, the ideas would just kind of, I'd almost like make music videos in my head for what I was listening to. And eventually I just kind of started writing it down to get it out of my head, like it'd just be this kind of loop of like this image or whatever, a scene. And, this is before I really even knew anything about the technical aspect of writing a script or writing a book. It's just like, let me write this down and kind of just get it out of my head. And that's where it all kind of started.
Very cool. So you mentioned that, you'd love to get on the beach with a laptop and, write full time. I don't know how that will work for you with four kids. But is that what you'd like to? Yeah. Where do you see yourself with your writing, 1 year from now or 5 years from now? Now that you've got a publishing credit to your name, now you've got an award that's fairly significant to your name that could help you. Like, is that motivation to kind of keep pushing, keep writing? And what do you hope to achieve with your writing within the next year or 5?
I mean, it is absolutely motivating to get that, like, just, riding that high. So I kind of look at that as just like, that's the fuel to like keep pushing forward and keep going and riding that momentum. So within a year, I definitely want to have the anthology published, and I have a website that I'm going to do as well. So I'm kind of late to the party with some of this stuff, but it'll be GillespieBooks.com. So I took the step to buy, the website.
Bought the domain. Yeah.
I got the domain. I just have to like make it. And so that'll be
Get the domain and let it sit for a year, and then it comes to renew, and you're like, I should really make this website.
Yeah, it's like a final, let it ferment for a little bit. So I want to have the website up. I want to have the Amazon publishing, and then figure out exactly how I want to kind of present my other novel. And so, like, Hugh Howey, like how he did with like Wool and Dust, how he kind of released his stuff as like vignettes at first, and then once he kind of had this following built up, it was like, okay, well, here's the big boy. So I don't know if it'll be something like that. So I just got to kind of think my way through that, but definitely those first two.
It sounds like you're looking kind of exclusively at self-publishing. Like, are you interested in kind of getting the agent anymore and submitting to try and get that novel picked up by a traditional publisher, or is that not really what are you thinking?
Well, I would like to go that route, but I think I've kind of tried to, get my hand in a couple more pots where it's like maybe like a blended style and that's kind of how my journey into the contest really started, was trying to build up some credentials and have something to my name where it's like, instead of, hey, I'm Evan Nobody, you want to pick me up and represent me. It's like, hey, I'm Evan Somebody, like I got a couple of things. So I would definitely want to still pursue that traditional route. And maybe that's what I would do eventually for the novel. But I think it's also important to kind of diversify and have like my own projects, like ownership of my own things on the side too. So I think more like a blended approach,
Yeah, definitely. And you said that you hope maybe one day you retire and move to the beach. Is retirement a long way off for you, or is, like, with working with the Air Force, have you got something you get to go early or substantial time away or something like that? Is there any hope of that sometime soon?
I mean, unless I don't break anything too badly, they'll keep me around for, should have another like 6 years, which, for Air Force, that could be like 1-2 more assignments. So I've really enjoyed, serving and being in the military, and it's been really good to my family. So I don't necessarily have any kind of plan of walking away from that. Of course, if, Netflix is like, hey, we got your anthology, we'd like to buy it for, $2. I'm like, oh, okay, like, let's see.
That was my next question, is if somebody comes and says, we absolutely love that novel we want to publish it for you, and we need another 2, and that's going to require you to write pretty much full time, you'll have to leave the military. Would that be something that you would consider? Or I could cut this part out of the interview if you're not allowed to say that in front of your bosses.
It's not like a shackle and chain, it's like, you have your enlistments, and if you kind of reach that stopping point, my experience is a lot of the leadership, they'll support you and like, thanks for what you've done, and, have a good life outside of this. So it'd be a long conversation. Part of it's almost like, I've made it this far. Like, I kind of want to retire just to be like, it's kind of like a story, you finish that story and put the period on the end of it. But at the same time, I also have a love and passion for writing. And if the opportunity presented itself and it was what's best for my family, we'd have that conversation and, kind of make the decision from there.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I mean, that's pretty much all the questions I have for you right now. I mean, I think we've got we got to talk about your story. Nathan, do you have anything else that you had lined up?
I'm curious if you had to maybe give advice to somebody who was in your shoes, let's say 2 years ago, where they flipped that switch and like, I want to be serious about it. What would you tell that person?
Great question.
I would definitely recommend, and I have been recommending, doing the contests. I was at a conference in DC just last week, and I was talking to some individuals and, just recommending like elegant literature, like, hey, check this out. It's been transformational for me. There's the growth of being able to step into these different genres, writing historical for the first time, like, hey, I'm going to challenge myself. And that'd be the thing, is like, challenge yourself. If you've never written from like the first person perspective, write a story from first person perspective, and just see how it feels. And if you need to change it up, you change it up. So just keep looking for those opportunities to sharpen yourself and start building some credentials, because it is so tough when, you're an unknown writer, for someone to want to take a chance on you. And also my advice would be to look into self-publishing, because there's a lot of reward there, and you have so much more freedom. And I think a lot of people don't realize, getting signed, you kind of give a lot away with that too, when you go traditional. So it's not all, flowers on the other side. But yeah, so just keep writing, do contests, look into self-publishing, and, just kind of try to position yourself to one day maybe an agent will come to you and say, hey man, like you got representation, like then you can maybe be in a better position to negotiate from there. So
That's great advice. Thank you, and congrats again on the win
thank you.
and the reward, and appreciate you writing that. I thoroughly enjoyed reading 7 Words to Total God.
Yeah, congratulations. You're an award-winning author now.
We did it.
All right. So just before we say goodbye, Nathan, do you have anything? Because so anybody watching this, you should be going to check out Nathan's newsletter, worldbuilders.ai, world builders with an S on the end, right?
Yeah, perfect.
.ai. Go check that out. He's got lots of great information, both for business and fiction. It's really, really interesting stuff. Nathan, do you have anything else that you're working on right now that you want to share with us? You write for yourself in the afternoons. Is there something that's going to be coming out? Or is that, anything you want to mention to anybody watching this? Now's the time.
No, check out the newsletter. That's the main thing. But yeah, I mean, working on my own stories and all that. So we'll see what the next few years hold for that avenue.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Nathan, for judging the contest. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on board. Evan, thank you for a fantastic story. I really loved it. And thank you for joining us and letting us just pick through it and your life to find out all about it, because that was a lot of fun. Thank you and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. You guys have a great day.